My next guest is someone who really needs no introduction. Michael O'Brien, Executive Vice President of WinnCompanies, also former city manager of the great city of Worcester. Michael, thank you so much for being on the show.
Alex, it's great to see you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being on. I appreciate it. When I get to pinch hit, I get the big dog sometimes,
Yeah.
you know?
Humble. I'm glad to be here.
No, thank you. So obviously, you know what's going on in the city of Worcester. We have a little bit of a boom going on, and with that, obviously, comes more population. Folks moving. You know, I said in the last segment, you know, a lot more folks are moving on from the capital, heading west, and Worcester being the second biggest city in New England, it kind of it works out pretty well for all of us because of the fact that we have more people coming here and want to do business here, but that also means that we need more housing. So Win specifically does some great stuff, and I really want to have the folks know what it is that Win does, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, congratulations to all involved with all the wonderful things happening in the city of Worcester. The community is part of my DNA.
Yeah.
And I watch all that's happening here so carefully, and the successes that you're finding and the progress that's happening warms my heart, and certainly all of us that watch this. And for all the right reasons: quality of life, great access, tremendous community assets, and the list goes on. And so that's being recognized, and for all the right reasons. So Win is a premier developer of primarily housing, but we do mixed use. Yeah. We do that in 23 states, including Alaska and Hawaii.
Wow.
We look to adaptive reuse, taking historic buildings and breathing new life into them, like Voc lofts or canal lofts.
Right.
But we also get into ground-up construction and do that here in the Commonwealth and throughout the country. And beyond that, we also have a military portfolio. We provide housing for 13 military bases throughout the country, including Alaska and Hawaii. And then we do management, our own management of property, and then beyond that, we do third party. So busy company, a lot going on, and it started here in Worcester, believe it or not. Coast Pond Village off of Mill Street was Arthur Wynn's one of his first projects, and he did that in a project in Salem. And the company's grown ever since.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Voc lofts, and people think of it as a gem. I mean, one of those kind of, you know, a project that people probably thought that would never happen or be able to kind of rehab that building, and you guys did wonderful things with it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and I kid you not when I tell you that there's many chamber members who live in that area because they're kind of transplants, and they found the Voc lofts to be the best fit. And
it was an interesting process on the Voc lofts. I was city manager at the time.
Yeah.
And at that time, there was really no market rate housing in downtown. And the downtown was teetering on being below the federal poverty rate.
Yeah.
And everybody was trying to determine would market rate housing work. Obviously, in my previous position, I believed in it, and now I obviously believe in it.
Absolutely.
And that was the first project that's kind of set the tone of that market rate housing can work. You can make these beautiful things happen in the core of Worcester's downtown, and people will respond. And I'm obviously pleased to have been part of it every step of the way.
Right, and now so with the Worcester Boys Club, the old Worcester Voc Boys Club that was there, you know, we're starting to rehab that project. What is it you think that are going to be the future for those kind of projects? Is it going to be that we're going to have to do it this way because of the fact that we have more folks that are moving in this way into this, you know, the area, or is it that it's just more accommodable? Is it a combination of both? I think personally, I think that, you know, that's the future. You see these buildings that need to be rehabbed, and they have beautiful brickwork. They have beautiful, you know, space, but. How do we utilize it, and what is it that Win does specifically for?
Well, on the Boys Club, it really falls right into our specialty. It's taking these grand, iconic buildings, historic buildings, and breathing new life into them, new uses. It's a very expensive proposition, and that's part of the driver on how do you make these types of projects work in places like Worcester. And so we use federal historic tax credits, state historic tax credits. We'll work alongside with local lenders trying to find the right product in order to kind of marry this world and create something wonderful where we'll move a new use in. The Boys Club lays out, because of its floor plates and its historic use as kind of school, more so for academic or institutional use, and beyond that, potentially for commercial. And so we're focusing on those markets for a new tenant. We hope that we'll get a new tenant soon. In the meantime, we're doing some stabilization work to the building We're grateful to the Fuller Foundation and to Preservation Worcester who are working with us to try to do this preliminary work. And we're bullish on what that building will be. With the great work that the city did, working with Trinity on the courthouse, the former courthouse, transitioning that to both market rate and affordable units. It's starting to see that kind of progress in Lincoln Square, which is so grand. And having this next project be the Boys Club, it sets a great atmosphere for the future of the auditorium, which is there, which is a big project and is a major undertaking and will take some work. But having context with progress always helps in those regards.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, that North Main Street area has to be an integral part of the entire connectivity from the City Hall area, even down heading towards the Main South area.
Certainly.
You know, you start from one end of Main Street to the other. You have iconic buildings up and down.
Right.
You know, and those buildings need to be preserved for the beautification of the city of Worcester, right?
Well, you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
I know that the central building has been preserved and has
absolutely.
been transitioned to market rate and affordable apartments with new retail on the first floor.
Right.
And I know Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences has obviously done unbelievable work in preserving some of the character of downtown while putting new uses in there for academic and student housing. What I've seen in my travels, which I've been lucky enough since I've left the city and moved to WinnCompanies, is that Worcester's far and away ahead of its competition in these major cities, second-tier cities that are trying to recreate and redefine themselves. And part of it is that we've preserved that history. Those buildings still exist. A lot of communities tore them down. And so that character in breathing new life into those buildings will be part of the draw that brings people in, because it's going to differentiate itself from kind of cookie-cutter communities that have all the same kind of chain restaurants and the like. There's so much variability and so much beauty that one new life is breathed into it. It's going to naturally bring people to want to be part of the community.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that you're starting to see a lot of new investors coming in and understanding the dynamic that it is here in Worcester. We have both new folks, but also the preservation of old architecture altogether. You know, so
we're working with the new buyer of the Skymark Tower.
Yeah,
that is an incredible purchase by a company from well outside of Worcester and New England that sees the progress that's underway and wants to make that strategic investment now while they can get it at a relatively inexpensive rate, because they see what the future is in a trajectory. That's a great testament to the work that's been done.
Right, and that's, I mean, if you look at the skyline of Worcester, that's one of the buildings that you kind of you see outside. But it's a great investment in the sense that it's right where everything's starting to grow. I mean, you're starting to see the Hanover Theater expand there. You're starting to see where the federal courthouse is there. The R&B, that area. It's starting to push out. Just like anything else, it'll expand.
What I would tell you, and you know this from all your work as well as the CEO, Tim Murray, is really people watch in the industry. The development world is relatively cloistered, and so it's smaller than you think. And people watch what others are doing and then make strategic decisions. They don't want to be first in typically. Win doesn't mind being first in. And when they see that progress, they invest. And when it happens from well outside of even the Atlantic coast, that means you've got good things happening. And so good money follows good money. And so congratulations.
Yeah, I think we're working hard in partnership with the city and obviously from your legacy as well. I mean, I think that you did a great job starting the process for us.
Good teamwork back then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we were at a time at that point that it wasn't what it is now. But I think that someone had to start the mission, and I think that you did a great job doing it.
You're nice, Alex. It was a great team. And was proud of that work, humbled by it, and it's one of those things that'll always be closest to my heart, is to that period of time in my life to be part of something bigger and be working alongside such great people.
Yeah, and I think at that time there was, we hadn't had that kind of partnership in the past prior to this. I mean, you had a city manager dealing with the lieutenant governor and a congressman who all kind of came to the same table and said, we need to do everything to
city
bring
council,
the city council,
business community.
Absolutely. You had business partners who wanted to come in and say, hey, we also want to invest in the area.
Folks like Fred Eppinger, Hanover Insurance, Charlie Monahan, Mass College of Pharmacy, that saw the futures, knew it was going to be bright, really cared about the community, and were prepared to step up, take risks. And I think back then, and it's probably similar now, because the greatest risk is not doing anything at all.
Absolutely.
And what was fascinating was there were people willing to do that, including elected officials, community members, neighborhoods. People really understood that there was a window that was provided to us that we had to take advantage of. And everybody kind of locked arms and checked the egos at the door and tried to make that happen, which is a wonderful thing.
And I think that still holds water when we deal with the current city manager, Ed Augustus.
Sure, doing a fabulous job.
Right, absolutely. And he kind of takes a little bit off your plate and says, hey, you know what? We're leaving our shields and swords at the door.
Yeah.
That's all. That's what he says.
It's not easy because they're big egos all around.
Absolutely. And that's a very hard thing for people to check sometimes, to leave your ego at the door, because we all have to sit at the same table and to get things done. So
it's not about us. It's about helping and making a difference. And it's about making progress occur, and it's really setting up the tables for future generations. And that's what everybody should be focused on.
Absolutely, and especially when you're thinking about these companies that want to invest in the area, it's hard to tell somebody from outside to say, hey, we have to do it this way because we're a smaller community than you think. We may be the second biggest city in New England, but we are also a very tight-knit community.
But what I would tell you in my travels, which is really all over, is there's a collaboration gene. This has been said quite often. In the DNA of Worcester that no other communities can emulate. And it has captains of industry working side by side with heads of major institutions, college universities working side by side with neighborhood activists, with business in the chamber. And having that ability to do that can facilitate great positive change, game changing. Other communities don't have that. I've been in communities trying to make that happen, and there are just deep divisions and silos that it's impossible, and it's holding them back. And these are great cities, very similar in character to Worcester, that can't seem to get over that hump to make progress happen because there's those underlying conditions that make it impossible. Yeah.
So one of the things that that the Chamber did was we embarked on a housing study about a year ago. So we're looking to roll it out October 25th for our Game Changers event. I know you'll be there. And
look forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be great. But I think that what people at home don't understand is that it's kind of a study for the city of Worcester folks. It's not a study for the Chamber. It's not how we, how can we, lure more companies here. It really is to say, hey, listen, we all need a place to live. And we don't want to see what happened in Boston happen in Worcester. Not to say that Boston's not doing great, but folks that live in their home for 30 years are now priced out of their own home because it's just that the market just changed. So we're trying to figure out what it is that we need, and you talk about it, affordable housing, mixed use. You got to have all these variable, very different kinds of housing for different kind of folks.
Sure.
Including, and we say that I said it last segment, but we have different things for life stages, right?
That's right.
So you have, let's say, for instance, you have, you graduate from college, you're going to live in a certain, you're living in an apartment, or you have a single family home. From there, then you go on to a bigger home when your family grows. But then, all of a sudden, kids leave. Do you need a 5-bedroom house for yourself and your wife, or your partner, whatever it may be? You come down to a different kind of living quarter. So.
Downsize.
Exactly, and that and that's what's going to happen. But we need to have this kind of crossover of different kind of housing available in the city.
I applaud the Chamber and you for doing that study.
Yeah.
It means that you're trying to look progressively and further out to understand where the needs are and what the stock currently is and how to make that happen so that you're able to meet that future need and current need and position the community in continued progress. Not a lot of communities are doing that. They're doing things kind of one-off and just making a project here and a project there happen. So I see Worcester as being the leader in this conversation. You're doing all the right things. I mean, Massachusetts is really grappling right now with housing.
Yeah.
From the east, Boston can't grow to the east because you got the water.
Right.
So all that growth is pushing west. And with the great connections that are being continued to be enhanced with commuter rail, and if that eventually grows into something of high-speed rail connecting all the great cities of Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
Affordable housing is really going to be done for the Boston area in great cities like Worcester and elsewhere.
Yeah.
You can't chase it in Springfield. I mean, in Boston, it's just far too expensive to develop.
Yeah.
That being said, is all the right steps being taken. Yeah. I know there's a big push for home ownership in trying to get particularly disadvantaged communities to start to get a chance at the American dream. And I think that's starting to evolve. What is the American dream? Lots of people are new urbanites. They prefer to be in a city close to amenities and have the ability to just walk and not have to have a car. And so all this is kind of going into the conversation that's taking place. And there's a lot of work ahead to try to figure out what that is.